Imagine standing before a judge. You were just undeniably guilty.
Right, like you literally have the weapon in your hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The jury has the video evidence. The victims are sitting right there, in the front row.
Yeah, there's zero doubt.
Zero. And instead of dropping the gavel and sentencing you to life, the judge he takes off his robe, he steps down from the bench,
Wow.
and he hands you his own spotless, lifelong record of perfect civic behavior. And he just looks at you and says, "You're free to go. I'll take the sentence. I'll go to the cell."
I mean, in any legal system on planet Earth, that is an absolute outrage.
Oh, totally. It's a terrifying miscarriage of justice.
Yeah, it violates every single impulse we have about fairness, about, keeping receipts and making sure people get exactly what they deserve.
Right. It shatters the fundamental arithmetic of human society. Because, we are built to operate on a ledger system, aren't we?
We really are. We need the math to balance. If you work the hours, you get the paycheck. If you commit the crime, well, you do the time.
It's predictable. It keeps the chaos at bay.
Exactly. But when you step into the world of Christian theology, specifically this ancient, really radioactive concept of grace, that ledger is completely incinerated.
Just thrown right out the window.
Yeah. We are looking at a spiritual economy that is financially ruinous and completely upside down.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are tackling a topic that is monumental, deeply debated, and, frankly, life-altering. We are exploring grace.
Yes.
And for you, the listener, whether you are brushing up on historical theology or trying to understand the tectonic plates that divide and unite the world's largest religious traditions, or, you just want to know why a 16th century monk had a psychological breakdown that literally changed the map of Europe.
Which is a crazy story in itself.
It really is. But this deep dive is custom-tailored for your curious mind.
We are working through a dense, multifaceted stack of sources today. We're tracking centuries of historical theology, looking at the absolute heavyweights.
Right, the big names.
Yeah, Augustine, Pelagius, Thomas Aquinas, Martin Luther, John Calvin.
It's quite a lineup.
It is. We also have some biblical commentaries specifically analyzing the parables of Jesus. And we are anchoring all of this lofty, abstract thought in practical reflections on everyday spirituality from organizations like Rooted Ministry.
Our mission today is to deconstruct the thick theological jargon surrounding this topic. We're going to map the historic battles that fundamentally fractured Western thought and extract exactly how this ancient idea shifts a person's everyday reality.
Because it really does shift everything.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because it is wild to think that an abstract word like grace, a word we casually throw around to describe like a ballerina's movements or a polite way to handle a mistake at work, actually represents a massive, centuries-long intellectual bloodbath.
A bloodbath is actually the perfect word for it.
So let's start with the baseline. What exactly are we dealing with here?
So, our sources point us to the theologian R.C. Sproul for a very clean baseline definition. He notes that the catechisms a lot of people learned as children give a really succinct answer.
Okay, what is it?
Grace is the unmerited favor of God.
Unmerited favor.
Right. And the operative word, the hinge upon which all of this turns, is unmerited. It is the precise opposite of a wage or a debt.
Okay, we break that down a bit.
Sproul uses that economic language to make the distinction super clear. So if you hire someone, right, you agree to pay them $100 for an 8-hour shift.
Sure.
And they complete the work. Handing them that $100 bill at the end of the day is not an act of grace.
Well, no, it's an obligation. You owe them. If you don't pay them, you're just a thief.
Precisely. You are morally bound to pay that debt. Grace, by definition, can only enter the equation when the account is entirely bankrupt.
When you owe nothing or when they deserve nothing.
Exactly. It is the voluntary, free bestowal of favor when wrath, punishment, or at the very least, just nothing at all is what is actually owed.
On paper, unmerited favor sounds beautiful. It sounds like a massive relief.
It does.
But the mechanics of how that actually works, specifically whether humans have the capacity to earn it or cooperate with it or even just accept it, that sparked one of the most intense, vicious debates in early Christianity.
It absolutely did. And I want to get into that friction because it's where this stops being a polite dictionary definition and starts becoming a fundamental view of human nature.
Right. So this takes us to the 4th and 5th centuries. The heavyweight bout between a British ascetic monk named Pelagius and the towering bishop of Hippo, Augustine.
Yes. The Pelagian controversy.
I've always found Pelagius fascinating because, history paints him as this arch heretic. But if you look at his actual motivations, He's essentially just a deeply earnest moral reformer, right?
That is a crucial piece of context.
Yeah.
Pelagius was looking at the church of his day in Rome, and he saw incredible moral laxity.
Just people doing whatever they wanted.
Exactly. He saw people living however they wanted and using the excuse of, well, human frailty. Like, oh, I'm just a sinner, I can't help it.
Ah. So they were using their brokenness as a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Right. So Pelagius built a theology driven by a massive emphasis on human natural ability. He wanted people to take responsibility for their actions.
That sounds pretty reasonable, honestly.
It does. And the cornerstone of his entire theological architecture was his absolute rejection of the doctrine of original sin.
Okay, so for you, the listener, just to clarify, original sin is the traditional idea that when Adam and Eve rebelled in the Garden of Eden, that guilt, that sort of spiritual corruption, was transmitted to all subsequent generations like a fatal genetic disease.
Like every human is born infected.
Right. So Pelagius rejected that completely.
Completely. He argued that Adam's sin affected Adam alone. In Pelagius's framework, Adam didn't pass down a corrupted, broken nature to everyone else. He just provided a really, really terrible example.
Oh, wow. So he's just a bad role model.
Yes, exactly. And humanity, unfortunately, has just been imitating that bad example ever since. But structurally, metaphysically, human nature wasn't damaged at all.
So we aren't born broken.
According to him, no. Because of this, Pelagius argued that the human will is completely intact and perfectly free. Every single child born into the world is in the exact same state of moral neutrality as Adam was before the fall.
So in his mind, if God commands us to be holy, we must possess the biological and spiritual hardware to actually pull it off.
Right, because God wouldn't demand something of us that we couldn't do.
Yeah, that would make God a tyrant.
That is exactly his logic. If God commands perfection, we must be perfectly capable of achieving it.
Okay, so what is the role of grace in a Pelagian world? Because if we have all the tools we need, what is grace even doing?
For Pelagius, grace isn't a supernatural rescue operation pulling drowning people out of the ocean. Grace is merely God educating or illuminating the mind.
Educating the mind.
Yeah, it's God providing the instruction manual. Grace is giving us the moral law, showing us right from wrong, and providing the ultimate good example in the life of Jesus Christ.
So Jesus is just the anti-Adam, the good role model.
Exactly. But the actual heavy lifting of obeying those rules, that's entirely up to the uncorrupted human will.
I see why this was wildly popular, and frankly, why it's basically the default operating system of modern Western culture.
Oh, 100%. It's theological self-help.
Yeah, it makes humans the master of their own destiny. It's human monergism, meaning one party, the human, doing the actual work of salvation.
Right.
So Pelagius is basically saying humanity just needs a really good YouTube workout tutorial, and we can all get spiritual six-pack abs completely on our own.
The YouTube tutorial analogy is perfect because a tutorial assumes your muscles are intact, your spine is healthy, and you simply lack the knowledge of proper form.
You just need somebody to show you the routine.
Right, you just need a teacher. But Augustine looked at this theology and he just recoiled. He was absolutely horrified.
Why? What was he seeing that Pelagius missed?
Well, Augustine, who was heavily influenced by his reading of the Apostle Paul, argued that Pelagius was drastically underestimating the sheer devastation of the fall. Humanity's core problem wasn't a lack of education. It was a total, catastrophic corruption of nature.
So if Pelagius thinks we just need the YouTube tutorial, Augustine is looking at humanity and saying, no, your spine is severed in 3 places.
Yes.
Like, a tutorial won't help a quadriplegic run a marathon. You don't need a life coach, you need a trauma surgeon to fundamentally rebuild you.
That's exactly it. Augustine argued that because of original sin, the human will is entirely captive. He mapped this out using specific Latin frameworks that our sources highlight.
Let's hear the Latin.
So, before the fall, humanity had the posse peccare, which is the ability to sin, and the posse non peccar, the ability not to sin.
So the will was truly neutral. You could go either way.
Exactly. But after the fall, Augustine argued, humanity collapsed into a state of non-posse non peccare.
Which translates to what? Not able not to sin.
Yes. Not able not to sin. Now, this is a tricky concept because it doesn't mean humans are incapable of doing civic good, right? Like feeding the poor or loving their children.
Sure, humans do good things all the time.
Right. It means that the fundamental orientation of the human heart is turned inward toward the self rather than perfectly toward God.
Oh, okay.
The will is still making choices, so humans are still morally culpable for their actions, but those choices are inherently enslaved to a corrupted nature. The will is captive.
I want to stop here for a second. because this is the terrifying realization of Augustine's theology. If our will is fundamentally captive, like you said, then a grace that merely shows us the rules, like Pelagius suggested, is actually a nightmare.
It is the ultimate cruelty.
Yeah.
Augustine realized that if grace is just illumination, if it just points out the impossible standard of moral perfection to a paralyzed person, then grace is actually just the law in disguise.
And broken people cannot follow perfect laws.
Exactly. Therefore, Augustine argued, grace cannot merely be educational, it must be regenerating.
It has to do the surgery.
Yes. It must be a supernatural, irresistible force that actually reaches into the human chest, resurrects the dead heart, liberates the enslaved will, and grants the gift of faith itself.
So God doesn't just make faith an option on the table. He creates the capacity for it.
He does all the work. So we have this massive dividing line drawn in the ancient world. Pelagius says we are healthy but ignorant, needing a teacher. Augustine says we are spiritually dead, needing a resurrection.
And the church historically sided with Augustine, right? They officially condemned Pelagianism as a heresy.
They did. But here's the massive question that arises from that. Even if we all agree with Augustine that humanity is fundamentally broken, paralyzed, and needs a total rescue operation, how exactly does God apply that cure?
How does the medicine get into the patient?
Exactly. Answering that specific mechanical question is what eventually fractured Western civilization.
Okay, this is where it gets really intense, because it was the fault line that created the 16th century Reformation, right?
Yes, it was.
To understand the split between the Roman Catholic and Protestant paradigms, we have to look really closely at the mechanics of justification. How is a broken person actually made right with a holy God?
Let's start with the Roman Catholic framework, because that relies heavily on the profound, systematic genius of the medieval theologian Thomas Aquinas.
Right. Our sources go pretty deep into Aquinas.
Yeah.
How did he map out the application of grace?
For Aquinas and the deeply rooted Catholic tradition, grace is understood as an infused habitus.
Okay, let's translate that for the listener. An infused habitus. We're talking about a habit, like biting your nails, or a literal substance.
It's definitely not a behavioral habit. Think of it more as an ontological reality, a spiritual substance, a new divine quality that is literally infused into the human soul.
Wow, okay.
Aquinas described grace as an elevation of human nature. God infuses the soul with this grace, much like an IV drip putting medicine into a bloodstream.
An IV drip. I like that analogy.
And once this grace is infused, it blossoms internally into the theological virtues: faith, hope, and charity.
So it's an internal metaphysical transformation. You are actually tangibly being changed on the inside.
Yes. And this is the crux of the Catholic view of justification. In this paradigm, justification is not just a single moment. It is a lifelong process.
It's an ongoing treatment plan.
Right. You receive this infused grace, which is primarily mediated through the sacraments of the church, like baptism and the Eucharist, and that grace transforms you from the inside out, empowering you to cooperate with God.
So human effort comes back into the picture here.
Yes, through cooperation, you do good works and become progressively more righteous over your lifetime. The ultimate staggering goal is deification, the idea that humans will actually participate in the divine nature.
That is a massive concept. But, if grace is essentially this spiritual medicine that needs to be infused into the soul, then whoever controls the IV drip holds all the power.
Ah, yes. And this is where the magisterium comes in.
The teaching authority of the church.
Exactly, because grace is treated almost as a tangible substance that must be dispensed to the faithful. The institutional church, specifically the magisterium, the official teaching authority of the Pope and the bishops, acts as the repository and the authorized dispenser of this saving grace.
You need the institution to access the cure. You can't just get it on your own.
Right, you have to go through the proper channels.
Okay, so the Catholic view is highly transformational, it's progressive, heavily reliant on human cooperation with the infused grace, and deeply tethered to the authority of the visible church.
That's a great summary.
But then, as we move into the early 1500s, an Augustinian monk named Martin Luther comes along. He looks at this entire system and essentially experiences a total psychological collapse.
Oh, it was a profound crisis. To really grasp the Protestant breakthrough, you have to understand the sheer terror inside Martin Luther's mind.
He was a pretty anxious guy, wasn't
He was agonizingly, painfully aware of his own sin. He looked at this Catholic system of infused grace and cooperative justification, and it terrified him.
Because he felt like he was never doing enough cooperating.
Exactly. He tried everything the medieval church offered to make himself righteous enough to please God. I mean, he fasted for days. He subjected himself to freezing temperatures. He spent hours upon hours in confession to the point of literally exhausting his
He
confessors.
would confess for like 6 hours straight, right?
Yes, because his conscience was never clean. If justification is a process of becoming internally righteous, how do you ever know if you have enough of the infused grace?
You don't.
Right? How do you know if you've cooperated enough? Our sources explicitly mention a crisis he had in 1519 while he was studying the Apostle Paul's letter to the Romans. He kept tripping over the specific Latin phrase, Justitia Dei.
The righteousness of God.
Yes, and Luther admitted in his writings that he literally hated that phrase.
Hated it. Wow.
He viewed the righteousness of God as an impossible, punishing, exacting standard. He felt that God was demanding a flawless internal purity that Luther knew deep in his bones he just did not possess.
Right, because no matter how many sacraments he took, no matter how flawlessly he lived as a monk, he knew his internal motivations were still selfish.
He fell short, always. He was trapped in a theological torture chamber where he was required to achieve a righteousness he was fundamentally incapable of producing.
But then he experiences a paradigm shift that literally rewrites history. He has this eureka moment in the tower of the monastery. What did he actually realize?
The breakthrough came when he realized he had been entirely misreading Paul's grammar.
Wait, grammar?
Yeah, he suddenly understood that when Paul spoke of the righteousness of God in Romans, he wasn't talking about a standard the sinner had to achieve by their own effort or cooperation. He was talking about a gift that God freely gives to the sinner.
Oh, wow.
Luther called it passive righteousness.
Passive righteousness.
Hmm.
Meaning we are completely passive in its generation. We don't actively create it. We don't cooperate to synthesize it. We merely receive it.
This is the atomic core of the Protestant doctrine of sola gratia, grace alone. Luther and the Reformers tore down the Catholic model of infused grace and progressive justification.
It just scrapped the IV drip.
Completely. They argued that justification is not a lifelong process of becoming internally good. Justification is a single, definitive, instantaneous, legal moment.
Okay.
It is a forensic declaration by God the judge.
Going right back to our opening analogy, the courtroom.
Exactly. In the Protestant framework, God declares the guilty person innocent, not because the person has an infused habitus that has made them actually perfectly good on the inside,
Right.
but because the perfect alien righteousness of Jesus Christ is imputed or legally credited to their account.
Alien righteousness,
Yeah.
meaning it comes from outside of us.
Yes.
Let me make sure I'm locking this in because the distinction is incredibly subtle, but it changes absolutely everything.
It really does.
The Catholic view of grace is like a hospital giving you medicine that physically heals and changes your body over time. The Protestant view is like a judge officially declaring you innocent and wiping your record clean, regardless of the messy, diseased reality of what you actually look like underneath.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. The Reformers loved the analogy of being clothed in Christ.
Clothed in Christ.
Yeah, so when the Christian stands before the burning judgment seat of God, they are wearing the pristine, pure robes of Jesus's perfect record. And those robes completely cover and hide their own messy, sinful clothes underneath.
So God just sees the robes.
Exactly. This is what led Luther to his famous paradox. The Christian is simul justus et peccator.
Simultaneously righteous and a sinner.
Yes. Righteous in their legal standing before God by imputation, but still very much struggling with the reality of sin in their daily life.
And the socio-political fallout of this is massive. I mean, think about it. If grace is a direct, imputed, legal declaration from God to the individual through faith alone, then the institutional church loses its monopoly on the grace economy.
Entirely.
You don't need the magisterium to dispense the IV drip.
No, you don't. And this naturally leads to the Protestant doctrine of the priesthood of all believers.
Which is this radical idea that every peasant has direct access to the throne room of God without needing a priest as a mediator.
It democratized theology in a way that shattered medieval Europe. If we look at this impartially, as observers of history, you can really see how these two massive theological architectures shape the psychology of entire cultures.
And totally. Like a Catholic framework cultivates a culture of continual, steady spiritual progression.
Right.
It is deeply tethered to community, to physical rituals, sacraments, and a visible historical institution that acts as an anchor.
Yeah, it's very communal. Whereas the Protestant framework, emphasizing a singular legal declaration and utterly unmerited favor, cultivates a highly individualized culture.
It's just me and God.
Right. It often leads to a heavy psychological focus on a specific, decisive moment of conversion. You prioritize a personal, direct relationship with God over institutional mediation.
It's a brilliant example of how a microscopic debate over the grammar of theology, whether grace is an infused substance or an imputed declaration, can literally redraw national borders, launch wars, and change the internal psychology of millions of people.
It's astounding, but as liberating as the Protestant view was for Luther's tormented conscience, it immediately birthed a massive, glaring paradox.
Right, the robot dilemma. I
Exactly.
mean, if the Protestant view is correct, and sola gratia means God does 100% of the saving work because humanity's will is totally dead, just like Augustine said, then what on earth is the point of human effort?
That's the million-dollar question.
Are humans just meat puppets? If we contribute 0% to our justification, do our actions, our choices, our morality even matter?
This was the immediate fierce attack leveled against the reformers by the Catholic Church. They essentially said, if you tell the peasants that their good works contribute absolutely nothing to their standing before God, they will just stop doing good works.
Yeah, you were going to create a society of lawless hedonists.
Right. Why be good if it doesn't earn you anything? To address this, we have to look closely at how the reformers understood the nature of grace itself. Our source text from the Evangelical Theological Seminary in Cairo hits this nuance beautifully.
What do they point out? Because it feels like a really tough corner the reformers painted themselves into.
They warn against the trap of materializing grace.
Mm.
Even Protestants can accidentally treat grace like a spiritual fuel that God pumps into our tanks so we can drive away.
Like it's a commodity.
Yes. But John Calvin and Martin Luther vehemently argued that grace is strictly relational. You cannot separate the gift of grace from the actual person of Jesus Christ.
So it's not a transaction.
No. Grace isn't a thing Jesus hands you like a coupon before walking away. Grace is God's personal, ongoing engagement with a human. When you are justified, you are united with Christ himself.
Yeah.
You get the giver, not just the gift.
Okay, I understand the relational aspect, but that still leaves the mechanical question of the human will. If Augustine says we are paralyzed, and Calvin says God does all the saving, how do our choices actually function? I mean, are we choosing anything at all? This is where we bring in the 18th century theologian John Wesley, right?
Yes. Wesley was trying to find a middle path.
He was trying to thread the needle between the strict predestination of the Calvinists and the human-centered life coach theology of the Pelagians.
Wesley is a really fascinating figure here. He introduced, or rather popularized, a concept called prevenient grace.
Prevenient, literally from the Latin meaning the grace that goes before or comes before.
Exactly. Wesley pointed to the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 9, which describes Christ as the true light, which gives light to everyone.
To everyone, not just the chosen few.
Right. So Wesley agreed with Augustine on the baseline. Yes, humanity is totally fallen, the spine is broken, the will is corrupted. Left entirely to our own devices, we would never choose God.
Okay, so he's with Augustine there.
But Wesley argued, because of the cross of Christ, God extends a universal baseline level of grace to every single human being from the very moment they are born.
For everyone.
Every single person.
So he's saying there is actually no such thing as a purely natural, totally depraved human walking around, left entirely to their own devices.
This is the profound implication of prevenient grace. It means the secular person sitting next to you on the subway, who has never opened a Bible, is already interacting with a measure of divine grace.
Wow.
Wesley argued that this prevenient grace reaches into the broken human will and restores it just enough so that a person has the capacity to either freely accept or freely reject God's saving grace.
Oh, that is brilliant. It levels the playing field.
It does. It isn't irresistible, like Augustine or Calvin might say. A person can say no to it and suppress it, but it is the divine spark that makes actual human choice possible again.
So Wesley solves the robot dilemma by saying God's grace acts first to give us back our free will, allowing for genuine human response.
Exactly. God makes the first move, but we actually respond.
That makes perfect sense in Wesley's framework. But going back to the strict reformers like Luther and Calvin, who didn't lean heavily on Wesley's concept of a universally restored free will, how did they explain the necessity of human action in a system of sola gratia?
Right. If you don't have prevenient grace, how do you get good works?
Yeah, if I'm totally justified by faith alone, why should I help my neighbor?
They explained it through the inescapable law of cause and effect. They argued for the concept of inevitable fruit.
Inevitable fruit.
Yeah, Calvin stated that while good works do absolutely nothing to cause our salvation, they are the necessary, unavoidable effect of being truly united with Christ.
So if you don't have the works, you don't actually have the faith.
Exactly. Luther put it brilliantly. He said, "We do not become righteous by doing righteous deeds, but, having been made righteous, we do righteous deeds."
Let me try to map this out using an analogy drawn from our sources, because this cause and effect relationship is vital.
Go for it.
It's like a car engine and its exhaust. Our good actions, our morality, our charity, those are the exhaust of a running car. The exhaust doesn't make the engine run.
Right.
If your car is dead, you can't capture exhaust from another car, pipe it back into your gas tank, and expect the vehicle to move. That's absurd. That chokes the engine.
It literally kills it.
The engine is powered by something else entirely, combustion. In this case, it's powered entirely by grace. But if the engine of grace is genuinely firing inside a person, there will absolutely, inevitably be exhaust. Good works are the inevitable byproduct of grace, never the fuel.
That is exactly how the reformers viewed it. And if you try to pipe the exhaust back into the engine, if you try to use your good works to fuel your salvation, the whole thing breaks down.
It just stalls out.
Right. The reformers tirelessly called people to moral action and good works. But they called them to work not to earn a wage, but in joyful, thankful obedience to a grace they had already secured.
Out of gratitude.
Exactly. Faith, as Luther described it, is a living, busy, active, mighty thing. It doesn't sit around passively, it works. But it works out of profound gratitude, not out of a desperate attempt to balance a ledger.
Okay, we've spent a lot of time mapping out some incredibly dense, towering theological architectures.
We really have.
I mean, we've gone through Augustine's non posse, non peccor, Aquinas' infused habitus, Luther's imputed righteousness, Wesley's prevenient grace. It's brilliant, but it's highly academic.
Very academic.
Let's step back and look at the actual founder of this faith. Jesus of Nazareth didn't walk around first-century Judea handing out systematic theology textbooks.
No, he certainly didn't.
He was talking to everyday farmers, merchants, widows, and fishermen. How did he communicate this staggering, world-altering reality of grace to them?
He used stories. He spoke almost exclusively in parables. And our source material from 1517.org provides a deeply disruptive lens for how modern people usually misread these parables today.
Disruptive is definitely the right word. The first thing the source points out, which blew my mind a little bit, is that the titles in our Bibles, like the parable of the sower or the prodigal son, are actually aftermarket editions. Jesus never titled his parables.
Never. The titles were added much later by editors to help with organization, but those titles often do us a massive disservice because they act as interpretive spoilers that send us looking in entirely the wrong direction.
How so?
Well, if the header in your Bible says the parable of the sower, you naturally spend all your time analyzing the technique of the sower. If it says the parable of the four soils, you obsess over which type of dirt you are in your spiritual life.
Oh, right. Like, am I the rocky soil? Am I the thorny soil?
Exactly. But if you look at Jesus' own explanation of the parable, the emphasis is overwhelmingly on the unstoppable nature of the seed, which represents the Word of God.
The titles trick us into centering the wrong element.
You absolutely do.
But the source goes much further, quoting the theologian Robert Farrar Capon, who argues that our habit of mining the parables for practical moral lessons is fundamentally flawed. We treat them like Aesop's fables.
Right.
We read them thinking Jesus is telling us a story so we can figure out who the good guy is, imitate him, and avoid being the bad guy.
And Capon points out why that is a disastrous misreading. If you actually attempt to imitate the heroes of the parables in real life, you will fail spectacularly because their behavior makes no human sense.
Wait, really? Give me an example.
Think about the economics and social realities of the stories. Good Samaritans who pick up bleeding, half-dead strangers on a dangerous road regularly get sued or mug themselves.
Well, yeah, that's true. It's incredibly dangerous.
Fathers who throw lavish, expensive parties for wayward, rebellious sons who just squandered the family inheritance, they get mocked by their community for enabling toxic behavior.
True. They'd be the talk of the town, and not in a good way.
And a rancher who abandons a flock of 99 sheep in the open wilderness to blindly chase down one lost sheep. That is a terrible businessman who will quickly go bankrupt.
Okay, that makes sense. So if they aren't moral fables designed for us to imitate, what are they doing?
They are subversive, shocking stories designed to showcase the outrage of grace.
The outrage of grace. I like that phrase.
They are highlighting a divine insanity. The parables aren't models of sensible human behavior. They are models of what God is actually like.
And God doesn't behave sensibly.
Not according to our ledgers. God's grace does not operate on sensible, ledger-balancing human logic. It operates on a terrifying logic that brings life out of death, that celebrates the utterly lost over the seemingly righteous, and that freely gives everything to those who deserve absolutely nothing.
It's an outrage because it violates our innate sense of fairness. It goes right back to the ledger we talked about at the very beginning.
It really does.
If we are honest, when we read the prodigal son, a part of us resonates deeply with the bitter older brother who stayed home, did his chores, and obeyed the rule.
Oh, absolutely. We feel bad for him.
We want the older brother to get the party. We don't want the kid who blew his trust fund on prostitutes to get the fatted calf. It offends our sense of justice.
Exactly. When we read the parables as moral to-do lists, we are actively replacing the gospel of unmerited grace with a new law of performance. And this speaks to a very deep, very desperate need within human psychology.
What does that need?
We constantly, compulsively want to be the hero of the story. When we engage with these ancient texts, our ego immediately searches for the savior role.
We want to be the one saving the day.
Right. We want to be the one doing the saving, the finding, the righteous acting. We fiercely resist recognizing ourselves as the desperate, lost subjects who are totally paralyzed and incapable of saving ourselves.
This flips everything. Let's look at how this changes a specific familiar story. Take the pearl of great price. Jesus says the kingdom of heavens is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. Upon finding one pearl of great value, he goes and sells everything he has, liquidates his entire life, and buys it.
Right.
Normally, if I approach this as a moral fable, I read that and think, okay, the lesson is that I have to be the merchant. I have to be willing to sell everything I own, give up all my worldly attachments, and buy Jesus. That's the standard human-centered reading, right?
It is the default setting of our brains. We place ourselves in the active role. We have to sacrifice to earn the prize.
But if Jesus and his outrageous grace are actually the center of the parable, the script is totally inverted. We are not the merchant. We are the pearl.
Yes.
And frankly, we are a pearl buried in the dirt. Jesus is the merchant. He's the one who gives up everything, his very life, his position in heaven, his blood, to buy us out of our captivity.
It's a complete inversion.
When you flip the script like that, it completely changes the emotional resonance of the entire text. It takes the crushing onus off my performance and places it entirely on his staggering sacrifice.
It is a breathtaking reversal. It transforms the parable from a heavy burden of law like, go sell everything you have to prove your worth, into a stunning proclamation of gospel. Look what he was willing to sell to get you back.
Wow.
It moves the engine of the story from human effort to divine rescue.
I love the theoretical beauty of this, but I want to push us into the final section of our deep dive. Because right now, if grace is this radical upside-down rescue operation where God does all the heavy lifting, it can start to feel very abstract.
I can see that.
It can feel like a theological insurance policy that only pays out in the afterlife. How does this massive historic reality actually hit the pavement on a random Tuesday morning?
Right, the practical application.
If I'm listening to this while commuting to work or folding laundry, how do I actually experience it?
To answer the Tuesday morning question, we turn to our source from Rooted Ministry and the writings of author Paul David Tripp. Tripp makes a vital point that corrects that afterlife insurance policy mindset.
What does he say?
He insists that grace is not a thing, but a person, the Holy Spirit.
There's that relational aspect, again, echoing exactly what Calvin and Luther argued centuries ago. It's not a substance, it's a presence.
Yes, grace is the present, active Holy Spirit working within the life of a person. And Tripp points out that grace doesn't just save us from eternal death in the future. It rescues us from ourselves on a daily basis. It transforms us.
But what does that transformation actually look like?
Well, and this is a crucial reality check. That transformation, that daily process of sanctification, is often incredibly messy.
It's not a straight line up.
Not at all. It doesn't look like floating on a spiritual cloud. It looks like the painful sting of conviction, the slow grind of growth, the struggle for obedience, and the frequent humiliating need for repentance.
So grace isn't just making everything easy.
No. Grace works on the front end to give us the strength to prevent sin, but it also works tirelessly on the back end of our daily fears, anxieties, and failures to restore us.
The Rooted Ministry source also makes a really piercing observation about modern entitlement. It argues that an incomplete view of grace, one that merely focuses on getting out of hell, actually breeds sense of entitlement in our daily lives.
Oh, absolutely.
We end up with this subtle Pelagian creep. We think, okay, I don't deserve heaven because I'm a sinner. I need Jesus for that. But down here on earth, I totally deserve this job promotion.
Yeah.
I deserve a healthy family. I deserve a good cup of coffee and a smooth commute because, generally speaking, I'm a decent, hardworking person.
That is the ledger system trying to reassert control over our minds. We compartmentalize grace. We keep it for the big spiritual things, but demand strict meritocracy for the daily things.
We want our paycheck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a true, comprehensive understanding of grace recognizes that we are owed absolutely nothing by the universe. Every single breath you take, every beat of your heart, every moment of fleeting peace is an unmerited favor.
Yeah, every breath.
When you truly internalize the depth of your own brokenness, it shatters your entitlement. And what rushes in to fill that void is profound, unshakable gratitude. It goes back to that quote from R.C. Sproul.
Remind me of the quote.
The essence of theology is grace. The essence of Christian ethics is gratitude.
If you think about the psychological freedom this offers, it's immense. We live in a relentlessly high-anxiety, high-performance culture. We constantly feel like we are falling behind.
Definitely.
Like we have to earn our keep, earn our status, earn our right to simply exist and experience joy. To realize that the foundational reality of the universe is actually unearned favor, that you don't have to earn every breath or every laugh, is an incredible release valve for modern mental health.
It allows you to finally see grace in the tangible, tactile, everyday moments. The Rooted Ministry text gives a highly specific, memorable anecdote about this very thing.
The wallet story.
Yes. The author tells a story about absent-mindedly leaving a green Vera Bradley wallet sitting on the roof of a gold SUV.
I loved this detail. She gets in the car, totally forgets the wallet is on the roof, and drives 300 miles on the interstate, going 80 miles per hour.
Right.
She gets all the way home, reaches for her backpack, realizes her wallet isn't there, and has that moment of sheer panic. We've all been there.
Heart drops to the stomach.
Exactly. So she walks out to the car, and the wallet is still sitting perfectly on the roof of the SUV.
Right. Now, we have to be precise here. Is finding your wallet on your car roof the exact same level of grace as the eternal salvation of a human soul? No.
Of course not.
But she rightfully identifies it as a manifestation of unmerited favor. She didn't deserve that outcome. The basic laws of physics dictate that she should have lost her wallet, her ID, her credit cards, her cash.
It should have flown off into the median hours ago.
Exactly. But it didn't. The text encourages us to train our eyes to see grace in the sensory details of life. The colors of a sunset, the complex taste of a really good cup of coffee, the sound of a child laughing. Even everyday pleasure preaches the reality of grace.
I love the beauty of this, and I genuinely want to live with that kind of hyper-aware gratitude. But I have to ask a challenging question.
Sure.
If we start saying grace is in the coffee and the sunset and the physics-defying wallet on the SUV, isn't there a risk of watering down the monumental life and death salvation grace we just spent the last hour unpacking?
That's a fair point.
Are we cheapening the word by applying it to lost luggage? How do we hold both realities without trivializing the cross?
That's a vital tension to hold. The key is understanding that these things exist on the same continuum of God's unmerited favor. The lesser graces, the sunset, the coffee, the recovered wallet, they are not the main event.
Okay, what are
They
they?
are signposts. They are small, daily, tactile reminders pointing us toward the much greater grace. They demonstrate the inherent character of a God who is constantly giving, constantly providing, constantly operating far outside the strict bounds of what we deserve.
So they train us to look for it.
Exactly. They are training wheels for our souls, teaching our eyes to recognize unmerited favor in the small, visible things so that we can stand in proper awe of the invisible, unmerited favor shown in the massive thing, our ultimate redemption.
Wow. Okay. That brings all the massive, disparate pieces of this puzzle together beautifully. Let's briefly guide you, the listener, back through the journey we've taken today.
It's been quite a ride.
It really has. We started on the ancient battlefields of the early church with Augustine and Pelagius arguing over the very nature of the human will, whether we just needed a good teacher to show us the rules or a total miraculous resurrection of our paralyzed hearts.
Right. And then we move through the dividing lines of the 16th century Reformation. contrasting the medieval Catholic view of grace as a transforming, infused habitus administered by the Church with the explosive Protestant breakthrough of an imputed legal declaration of passive righteousness received by faith alone.
We looked at the Wesleyans, who introduced prevenient grace to show how God acts first to restore our free will. And we used the car exhaust analogy to clearly map out how our good works flow inevitably out of a grace-fueled engine rather than acting as the fuel itself.
Then we waded into the divine insanity of Jesus' parables, stripping away the aftermarket titles and flipping the script to see God not as a demanding moral judge, but as the merchant trading everything he possesses for us, the lost pearl in the dirt.
And finally, we landed in the reality of a Tuesday morning, finding unmerited favor in a morning cup of coffee, and realizing how this theology turns our modern, suffocating entitlement into deep, liberating gratitude. Understanding these historical perspectives takes this abstract academic concept and turns it into a totally new lens for viewing your entire reality.
It permanently alters the ledger. It changes how you view your own failures, how you view God's disposition toward you, and ultimately how you view the broken people around you.
And that leads me to a final lingering thought I want to leave you with to mull over as you go about your day. We live in a modern society that is fiercely, almost violently driven by strict meritocracy, by cancel culture, by keeping meticulous receipts on everyone's failures.
Oh, we keep all the receipts.
We do. We demand, loudly and constantly, that everyone gets exactly what they deserve. Nothing more, nothing less. We want the scales to balance perfectly. But if the core of this ancient theology, that the most beautiful, essential, and life-giving things in the universe are fundamentally unearned, is actually true, what would happen if we injected just a fraction of that divine insanity into our justice systems, into our social media feeds, or into how we treat our worst enemies today?
If the ledger of the universe is truly broken by grace, how does that change the way you keep score?
Something to think about. Until next time, keep diving deep.